Kia ora and welcome to CIO Leadership Live New Zealand. I'm your host, Kathy O'Sullivan, editor for CIO New Zealand. And my guest today is Mark Rees, who's the Chief Technology Officer at Xero. Welcome, Mark. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Kathy. It's great to be talking to you.
Thanks. Yeah, great to hear all about Xero. So to kick us off, can you tell us a little bit more about your role and what your team does?
Yeah, no, sure. So I've been the Chief Technology Officer at Xero for nearly 4 years now. So in that job I lead, it's around 1,800 staff in technology spread across Australia, New Zealand, the UK and the US. And there's kind of two kind of primary types of teams. There's our teams that are responsible for building and running our core product around the world, which is, now we have about 3 million subscribers or so around 10 million users. So it's a pretty scaled product. And then there's a lot of teams that are kind of focused on things relating to trust. So security, stability, architecture, the governance of the way we use data, AI, machine learning, etc. So yeah, a lot of the way we think about the teams and the way we run them is to respond to the kind of rate of growth in the company. So both in terms of customers and the pressure that puts on our technology, but also in the number of people, which we'll talk a bit about, but it's kind of the core, driving force between a lot of what we do at Xero is dealing with that scale.
So 4 years and a huge period of growth for the company. And as you said, a lot of users, a lot of customers, and I'm sure a lot of transformation during that time. And often the word transformation, it's used as if it's a given within organizations, but in reality, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. So could you tell us a bit about how that approach has taken shape in your own career?
Yeah, no, sure. So as I said, it's like dealing with change and transformation is the core challenge at a company like Xero, which, many people, it's kind of post the scale up phase. But, it's a fascinating problem because, things move fast. Like we're growing customers and employees around 30% a year. So you have to really pay attention to the signals you get about things that aren't working as you want them to. And you have to do that quite early because as you get bigger, driving change is challenging, which we can talk a bit about. So a lot of what I do is have to, kind of challenge myself and my team to go, we may have this way of working. It may have worked last year, but almost certainly the growth and scale will mean that it won't keep working. And so we have to identify the places where we're hitting kind of tension or bottlenecks and really lean into taking those on, which is a fascinating thing. You have to challenge yourself and your team and the way you work to kind of evolve all the time. I think the other thing with transformation is you have to treat it like a first-class piece of work. What I mean by that is we think a lot about how work flows through our product teams, so how we ensure there's good flow and prioritization and stuff. And sometimes it's easy to take this transformation work and just kind of add it on as a separate thing, but it consumes the time of the people and the leaders and the teams. So you have to treat it like it is a piece of work, manage it with all the systems you have in place, which I think is a really important element because we can, we have around 250 teams. There's plenty of ways we want them to change the way they work and the work they do, but it's unrealistic just to, flood them with that as well. We have to be really careful about how much work in progress, particularly when it comes to change, that we apply to those teams.
Absolutely. Burnout is such a real thing at the moment as well.
Yeah.
So walking back from that end product of transformation, is there ever a starting point to kick off a change? I mean, are there any kind of key steps you think CIOs must take along the way?
Yeah, I think I think establishing really clear the inception of these transformation pieces of work is really critical for a number of reasons. One, I think a lot of the success in them comes from the way you clearly set up the objective and the frame and the scope for it, because they can evolve with time and normally expand in terms of the things that are added to them. We call them kind of Christmas tree style projects where more and more stuff is tacked on them. So you have to be really clear about the scope and the value you want from the piece of work. I think the other part of that, which is really critical, especially in contemporary workforces, is the why around the work. We lead our teams in terms of purpose, and so therefore having a really clear, deeply understood explanation of why you're doing something and coming back to that is really critical. I think that's probably the defining defining thing to do at the start. Like we did in 2016 to around 2018, we migrated our core platform from Rackspace as a managed service onto AWS. And so, that was a really galvanizing piece of work, where there's a very clear purpose for it and motivation to do it. And I think that really was key to that project succeeding. In fact, I think those situations where you have really clear why drives greater morale and alignment, and actually, kind of is a good antidote to burnout in some ways as well. I think the clarity and the coherence that come from a clear reason why you're doing something is really makes it counterintuitively, because they can be high pressure pieces of work. I think it makes it easier for people to understand and connect with, so they have a better kind of lived experience of the work.
Knowing what they're working towards is so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so you mentioned, transformation can be challenging, and I'm sure a lot of CIOs would resonate with that. So what are some of the kind of common roadblocks that you've encountered that, either to be aware of or try to avoid along the way?
Yeah, I think there's things that I talked about in terms of clarity of scope and I think you have to protect these initiatives over time, because they, even if you start them off well, they can, they go through it's almost like those Gartner adoption for curves for technology. There's this period of kind of hope and aspiration, and then they are tough, and so they go through a bit of a trough of despair. So you have to kind of work through that. One of the things I found is really patience is really key for this kind of work, because often in your role in the center of the organization, things can feel slow, but the perception of the teams is that they can be working really hard and working really fast. But I think the kind of feedback loop on this work can be slower, so it takes a while. Your perception of it can be that it's taking a lot of time, even though it's actually moving quite quickly. So I often find that waiting is one of the key skills for this. And then I just think it's really to be really clear about the benefits and the value you want to get out of it. Say if we're modernizing a piece of technology, you also have to modernize the teams and the way they work along at the same time. And I think you can forget that. It's often there's this flow-on effect where a limitation in the organization, people adapt to it and they build behaviors to avoid it. And then you have to go back and you have to challenge those kind of models that have around. So if you have a bit of technology that's hard to change, people will actively avoid changing it. They'll develop other ways of doing things because of that bottleneck. And so if you resolve the bottleneck, you have to go back and challenge them to change the way they work. Otherwise, you won't get the benefits of that transformation. So, it's pretty obvious, but they have to go really tightly hand in hand.
Yeah. So just on that, do you like to see transformation, as a project with milestones and deadlines, or is it just an ongoing development? Is there ever an end date to transformation?
Yeah, I think it is perpetual, right? The changes in technology and the changing expectations of the role of technology means that you're going to be always transforming what you do. That being said, I think the vehicle you use to execute this work has to start and it has to stop, right? You can't, I think in terms of dealing with people and projects and value and stuff, you have to take this acknowledgement that you're always going to be doing a certain type of work, we call it scaling related work. It's true, but you have to break it up into chunks that you can start, that you can measure the success of, and you can celebrate the finish of, I think, in terms of turning it into consumable, packets of things that an organization can consume. That's definitely how we think about it. So we've been on this journey of reinventing our platform every sort of 2 to 3 years because of the scale. And you could look back and go, that's a journey through time that's just driven by scaling and the need to transform technology. But each of those has been discrete pieces of work that have started and stopped, which I think is really important in terms of the health of the people involved in it, and and the kind of taking some joy and celebration and achieving something too as well.
Yeah, managing that change fatigue, I guess, is just as important. So you mentioned there, your role really is at the center of the business. So as Chief Technology Officer, in what ways do you collaborate and influence the leadership team and the rest of the organization?
Yeah, no, sure. My, as you said, because we're a product and tech company, the technology is the core product that we sell in a way through the product team. So it's very much at the heart of the company. I think great leadership teams always have that mentality, that first team mentality of you have your functional role, but you are accountable for leading the company. And that's definitely how the leadership team of Xero works. For me, my role is kind of that technology functional leadership, but at the risk of oversimplifying it, I think a lot of what my role is to stand back and look at all the things we can do and try and balance that out against what we should do, and the amount of things we should take on, while also balancing the stuff we have to do on trust. So we have a very kind of can-do culture, but I have to kind of be the person who stops and goes, what's the right amount of work to do, and how do we balance that with the work we have to do to earn trust around security and reliability, and kind of sometimes be the person who says no to stuff, but try and get us into the sweet spot of prioritizing clearly and balancing out what can be effectively done. The other thing is really about explaining, which maybe we can touch on in a subsequent question, but I think a lot of my role in the company is really, I spend a lot of my time thinking of myself as like explaining product development or software engineering to the rest of the company, because I think it's non-intuitive the way it works, and a lot of people's mental models are based on management systems and concepts that are quite dated. So that's a core part of explaining the right way to think about measuring and leading product teams.
Yeah, absolutely. So the role of CIO, it is evolving, and there's a lot more titles these days, from Chief Technology Officer to Chief Digital Officer, Chief Innovation Officer, a range of different titles. And it really does depend on the business and what they want out of that role. But what do you think are some of the key attributes of a successful modern day CIO when it comes to leadership?
Yeah, I think we talked about it. I sort of think of myself as the explainer in chief, right? Like explaining about the nature of the technology, the opportunity that comes from the technology, the way effectively for us to work in terms of the product and technology teams. So that's a really critical skill. And I think if you unpack that a bit, one of the key things that technology leaders have to be great at is showing a bit of empathy in the way you explain things, because it is a jargon-filled, and somewhat unintuitive space in the business. So I think really communicating with clear examples and jargon-free is really important. Understanding that your peers, I think that empathy in terms of their pressures on them and the parts of the business is really important to do a good job of being a CIO as well. And just the constant communication as well. I think those are the key skills. In many ways more important than staying right up to date with the latest technology. I think to be that kind of communication, I find, is really key to doing that job well.
Yeah, indeed. And you mentioned there that Xero has a can-do culture. So can you tell us a little bit more about, how you, help your team grow and meet their professional and personal goals? Yeah,
we spend a lot of time on a lot of things relating to that. I think that the way people work these days is really evolving quickly. And I think that's, it's really true post-pandemic as well. I think the key to a lot of the way we want people to learn and develop and achieve their goals is sort of anchored around a culture of trust and open dialogue, which comes from, clearly is underpinned by psychological safety. So we do a lot of work on our culture around, kind of learning from failure, the importance of frank feedback, the investment we have in our people leaders and their ability to kind of help and develop our staff in terms of leading the individuals and providing them feedback and helping them develop. We also have this model which we call Kaizen as well. So we have our name for what we call communities of practice. So these are, cohorts of peers in domains like, say, front-end development or data or security that are kind of develop a lot of the training and guidance and collateral for different domains in the business as well, which is really a really key part of the way we want our staff to lean into, kind of pushing forward those practices and the craft of what they do as well, to give them, feedback. I think the other part of that is really, really committed to a diverse workforce, which is really important, I think, in terms of a whole lot of things which are, kind of widely understood. I mean, even for things like as esoteric as, we do a lot of AI these days. It's really important in that stuff that you think hard about the biases you build into the algorithms you create. And I think the best solution to that is really kind of diversity in terms of the teams you have working on it. There's a lot of technical things, but that kind of diverse workforce really unlocks great, potential psychological safety and trust, and that's key to that feedback, which is key to learning and development.
So what practical things are you doing to get more people from diverse backgrounds or diverse perspectives into roles in Xero?
Yeah, we do a whole lot of things, a whole range of things. Great example is our Toronto team. One of our engineering leads there, Patrick, has been driving a really successful boot camp to bring in emerging, engineering external female leaders and, as interns, and really taking them through quite an accelerated learning exposure mechanism. I think there's a kind of narrative it's easy to fall into around gender diversity where, the STEM subjects aren't producing enough, candidates, and so you can just be a victim of that. But I don't think we don't really think that's good enough. So we try and work hard, and it's sort of beholden on us to think as well to do positive outreach things. So things like that boot camp where we actively invest in engagement externally to develop potential female leaders, female senior engineering leaders in particular, before they come to Xero, to kind of intervene in that. And it's also, we have some great examples where you could be complacent and, just accept where the tech industry is. I mean, I have lucky enough to have in my security team, I have a female executive general manager with a female GM reporting to her, with a female team lead. So there's heaps of potential for that if you kind of set it as a kind of priority, which we have around increasing diversity, and you look at the way you can develop talent internally, proactively, and also look externally through things like boot camps and outreach to external communities. We actually, I think some parts of that are doing pretty well. We have a 43% female board, our 40% of the leadership team is female, and about 43% of our employees. Probably the weak spot is in the technology domain, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and look, you're certainly tracking better than a lot of other companies in terms of their gender split. But yeah, great to see the progress there. So just reflecting on your own career, Mark, are there any mistakes that you've made along the way that when you reflect on them, they've really shaped you as a leader?
Yeah, I think so. Plenty of mistakes, to be honest. One thing, a great example, just an example of that was at Xero, we did this big AWS migration as a really successful project. you feel like it was 2.5 years of quite hard work, and you feel kind of tired after that. And so I think collectively as an organization, we just sort of had this period of kind of still moving forward, but not having that real clarity and focus on one thing that's really important to us. And the counterintuitive thing, which I kind of alluded to before, is that that's the worst place to be as a tech team. And I think morale dropped, kind of fractures out into lots of different focuses. There's a lack of coherence, kind of all sorts of things. So I think it was on me for not resetting the purpose clearly and having a clear goal, which I think is really critical and kind of galvanizing. So that's one example. I find that you learn the same thing over and over again, right? Like it's just seeing the thing, seeing clearly enough into what's going on to identify the signs of a practice is not the right thing. Like we deeply believe in doing things iteratively with customer feedback and validating as we go, because I think all the literature, it's stark how clear that that's the right approach. But it's really easy to slip into not doing that and doing big kind of waterfall style pieces of work, which increase your risk. And I think often I find the hard thing is identifying that you are doing that again. So if it's in a domain that's a little different than you used to, like we do lots of compliance work, it's easy to tell yourself that you have to do this kind of big bang style waterfall approach to that work because there's a date set by regulation. And it's really, I find myself doing that. You have to really kind of stop it, call it out, see that deviation from what is the best way to do things and kind of go back to it.
What would be your advice to someone who is aspiring to be, a chief technology officer or CIO or, a senior IT leader? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think, and lots of these three things, which I think are important, are really just general leadership things. I think they're not too particular to technology. So I think the first thing is really feedback is really critical. Like I found with the teams that work for me, being really direct and frank with them about feedback and in a kind of curious and humane way is really critical to being a leader. There's too much sort of, and maybe even a little bit of a Kiwi thing of not being direct with people and leaders and explaining what you see with them is really important. You can't do that enough. The other one I touched on was just kind of patience, right? Like we hire brilliant people and lots of them. And so you really just have to set a clear strategy and objectives, create the mechanisms you can to measure progress and trust the people you hire to get on with it. I think I always find that it's hard because, like many technology leaders, I have a real bias to action, but they can get you in trouble if you try. Sometimes the intervention you think is helpful is the worst thing to do. And I kind of mentioned that in patience, but the other one is just about the importance of creating space as a leader. That like I said, we hire these really brilliant leaders, and my job is to kind of give them the space to develop and do and work and trust them with what they do. That is, I think, a really important. Doing those things, feedback, being patient, and as a leader, trying to work about how you create space for the people you hire to do their work are really critical things.
Some great advice there. And so then finally, Mark, what's important to you in the months ahead?
Yeah, so we're in this time of year, we have our XeroCon events. So these conferences we run around the world. I just got back from the one in London, which was awesome. And then we have XeroCon in New Orleans and then in Sydney. So there's a lot of work associated with those. There's been the 3 year COVID-induced break between them. So actually getting back to talk to these customers, to explain them what we're doing and to hear from them is the big focus for the next couple of months. And we're actually talking a lot more. I was in the product keynote talking a lot more about the work we're doing around things that relate to trust and improvement of technology. We're finding that our customers a lot lot more interested in that than they have been. So we're talking a lot more about that. I think partly because they depend on our service to such a high degree that they want to know what we're doing, and they make a big commitment to it. So they also want to understand the work we're doing to transform ourselves, because they want Xero to be there for a long haul, and they want us to get better and improve and provide new functionality in the service. They want to know what we're doing to make sure that's the case. So those Xerocon events are the key thing, and it's just it's really good to be able to travel again. Actually, I'm really enjoying it.
Absolutely. So exciting to be out in the world again, meeting people.
Yeah.
Mark Rees, Chief Technology Officer at Xero, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks. Great to talk to you, Kathy.